Section 1: The dawn of human-machine integration. How neural implants and brain-computer interfaces are moving from theory to reality. For most of human history, the boundary between the body and the machine was absolute. Tools could extend the strength of our muscles, lenses could sharpen our vision, and machines could amplify our reach, but the brain itself remained untouched. Thought stayed locked inside biology. That boundary is now dissolving. Human-machine integration did not begin with microchips or artificial intelligence. Its roots lie in neuroscience, in this simple realization that the brain is an electrical system. Every thought, every movement, every sensation emerges from electrical impulses traveling through networks of neurons. Once scientists learned to measure those signals, the idea of translating thought into machine-readable commands stopped being philosophical and became technical. The first critical step occurred in the early 20th century, when electroencephalography revealed that the brain produces measurable electrical rhythms. These signals were weak, noisy, and poorly understood, but they proved something revolutionary. Mental activity leaves physical traces. The brain was no longer a black box. It was an interface. For decades, this knowledge remained largely observational. Scientists could record brain signals, but they could not meaningfully interact with them. That changed in the second half of the 20th century, when researchers began stimulating neural tissue electrically and observing predictable responses. Muscles contracted. Sensations appeared. Perception could be altered. The implication was profound. If the brain could be read, it could also be written to. This realization marked the conceptual birth of the brain-computer interface, or BCI. At its core, a BCI is a translation system. It converts neural activity into external action, or external signals into neural perception. Early BCIs were crude, slow, and limited to laboratory environments. Yet even in their infancy, they demonstrated something unprecedented: direct communication between the human brain and a machine without muscles, speech, or physical movement. Initially, the motivation was medical, not enhancement. Patients with spinal cord injuries, locked-in syndrome, or neurodegenerative diseases had intact cognitive function, but no reliable way to interact with the world. For them, BCIs were not futuristic experiments, they were potential lifelines. If a person could not move their body, but could still generate neural intent, then a machine could move for them. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, advances in microelectronics, signal processing, and computational neuroscience converged. Researchers began implanting microelectrode arrays directly into the motor cortex of animals and, later, humans. These implants could record activity from dozens or hundreds of neurons simultaneously. When subjects imagined moving a hand, a cursor moved. When they intended to grasp an object, a robotic arm responded. This was not simulation, it was control. What made these systems work was not just hardware, but decoding algorithms. The brain does not issue commands like a keyboard. Neural signals are probabilistic, distributed, and context-dependent. Machine learning models became essential, learning to map patterns of neural firing to intended actions. Over time, both the algorithm and the brain adapted to each other, forming a closed-loop system. This mutual adaptation revealed something critical. The brain is not fixed. Neural plasticity allows it to incorporate external devices into its body schema. In controlled experiments, subjects began to perceive robotic limbs as extensions of themselves. The brain rewired around the machine. This was the moment the word cyborg stopped being metaphorical. Neural implants soon expanded beyond motor control. Sensory interfaces followed. Cochlear implants, which bypassed damaged auditory structures to directly stimulate the auditory nerve, became one of the most successful neural prosthetics in medical history. Millions of people regained functional hearing through direct brain-machine interaction, often without consciously perceiving the technology itself. Visual prosthetics soon attempted something similar, stimulating the visual cortex or retina to generate artificial perception. Though resolution remains limited, the principle has been proven. Machines can inject information directly into human perception. At the same time, deep brain stimulation emerged as a therapeutic intervention for neurological disorders such as Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, and severe depression. By modulating abnormal neural activity, implanted electrodes could restore function and relieve symptoms. These devices did not replace the brain, they corrected it in real time. This distinction matters. Human-machine integration is not about replacing biology, it is about interfacing with it. Modern neural implants now operate at the intersection of neuroscience, materials science, and computation. Flexible electrodes reduce tissue damage. Wireless systems eliminate infection-prone connectors. Power-efficient chips allow implants to operate for years. Each technical improvement reduces the biological cost of integration. At the same time, non-invasive BCIs using EEG, FNIRS, and magnetoencephalography continue advancing, offering lower-risk access to neural signals at the cost of resolution. The field is converging toward hybrid systems, minimally invasive yet highly informative. What makes this moment historically unique is that theoretical uncertainty is no longer the main barrier. The brain has proven compatible with machines. Signals can be read, intent can be decoded, sensation can be written back. The remaining challenges are engineering, ethics, and scale. And this is where the laboratory becomes the frontier. Inside modern neural engineering labs, humans are no longer passive test subjects. They are active participants in feedback loops where biology and silicon learn together. Every experiment refines the question not of whether humans can integrate with machines but how deeply. This first section establishes the foundation. Human-machine integration is not speculative. It is already happening, quietly, clinically, incrementally. The next question is not philosophical. It is neurological. Section 2: Mapping the mind. How brain signals control machines. The neuroscience behind thought-driven technology. To control a machine with the mind, science must first solve a deeper problem, understanding how intention exists inside the brain before it becomes movement. Thought is not a single signal, nor is it located in one place. It is an emergent property of billions of neurons interacting across layered networks. Mapping this complexity is the central challenge of brain-computer interfaces. The brain does not issue commands in discrete packets. There is no move arm neuron or click signal. Instead, intention is encoded as patterns, distributed changes in firing rates, timing, and synchronization across populations of neurons. These patterns evolve continuously, even before a person becomes consciously aware of a decision. This means that BCIs are not reading thoughts. They are inferring intent from dynamic neural states. The first region scientists targeted was the motor cortex, a strip of tissue responsible for voluntary movement. Decades of research had shown that neurons in this area fire preferentially for certain movement directions, forces, and velocities. When a person reaches for an object, thousands of neurons adjust their firing in coordinated ways. The movement emerges from the collective, not the individual neuron. By implanting microelectrodes into this region, researchers could sample small portions of this activity. Each electrode records the electrical spikes of nearby neurons, producing a stream of data that appears chaotic in isolation. The meaning only emerges when many signals are analyzed together. This is where decoding begins. Decoding neural signals requires statistical models that can translate electrical activity into actionable outputs. Early approaches used linear regression models to correlate firing rates with movement parameters. These models worked, but only within constrained tasks. As complexity increased, so did the need for adaptive algorithms. Modern BCIs rely heavily on machine learning, particularly Bayesian models and neural networks, which can learn the probabilistic relationship between brain activity and intent. Importantly, these systems are not pre-programmed with rules. They are trained through interaction. The human brain generates signals, the algorithm predicts intent, the outcome is observed, and both systems adjust. This feedback loop is critical. The brain itself learns to produce signals that are easier for the machine to decode. Over time, neural activity becomes more consistent, more separable, and more efficient. The machine adapts to the brain, and the brain adapts to the machine. This mutual learning reveals a fundamental property of human cognition. The brain is not optimized for biological limbs, it is optimized for control. When given a new effector, whether a robotic arm or a cursor, the brain treats it as just another output channel. Mapping intention becomes more complex when moving beyond motor control. Sensory perception, emotion, and abstract thought are distributed across overlapping networks. Sensory cortices encode information not as images or sounds, but as spatiotemporal activation patterns. Reproducing those patterns artificially is one of the hardest problems in neuroscience. Consider touch. When the skin contacts an object, mechanoreceptors send signals through the spinal cord to the somatosensory cortex. Different textures, pressures, and temperatures activate distinct neural populations. To recreate touch artificially, a prosthetic must generate stimulation patterns that the brain interprets as natural sensation. Experiments have shown this is possible. When electrical stimulation is applied to specific regions of the somatosensory cortex, subjects report feeling pressure, vibration, or movement localized to specific body parts even if those parts no longer exist. The brain's body map, known as the homunculus, persists even after physical loss. This discovery has profound implications. It means machines do not need to replicate biology perfectly. They only need to trigger the correct neural interpretation. The challenge intensifies when decoding cognitive states rather than actions. Decision-making involves prefrontal networks, memory circuits, emotional modulation, and sensory context. Intent here is not about movement, but about choice. While current BCIs cannot read thoughts in the narrative sense, they can detect patterns associated with attention, error recognition, and expectation. For example, error-related potentials brief neural signatures that occur when a person realizes a mistake can be detected within milliseconds. BCIs can use these signals to correct actions before the user consciously intervenes. In this way, machines begin to anticipate human intent. Timing is critical. Neural signals unfold on the millisecond scale. To feel natural, a BCI must respond within this window. Delays longer than a few hundred milliseconds break the illusion of control. Achieving this requires low-latency hardware, real-time signal processing, and efficient decoding pipelines. Noise is another major obstacle. The brain is electrically noisy, and implants pick up interference from muscle activity, blood flow, and environmental sources. Separating meaningful signals from background activity is an ongoing engineering challenge. Advanced filtering techniques, adaptive thresholds, and probabilistic inference are used to extract usable information. Beyond electrodes, researchers explore alternative modalities. Functional near-infrared spectroscopy measures blood oxygenation changes associated with neural activity. Magnetoencephalography captures magnetic fields produced by neuronal currents. Each method offers different trade-offs between resolution, invasiveness, and practicality. Despite these limitations, one conclusion is now unavoidable. The brain is inherently compatible with machines. Neural signals are not symbolic or mystical, they are physical, measurable, and interpretable. Mapping the mind is not about decoding consciousness. It is about understanding control systems, and once control is possible, the next step is integration. Section 3 Inside the Lab, the people pioneering cyborg technology, where human augmentation is actually being built. The popular image of human augmentation often centers on sleek machines and futuristic implants, but the reality of cyborg technology does not begin with hardware. It begins in laboratories that look ordinary, clinical, and deliberately cautious. These are places governed not by ambition alone, but by ethics committees, regulatory frameworks, and the slow discipline of experimental science. Inside these labs, the future of human-machine integration is being shaped not by lone inventors, but by interdisciplinary teams. Neuroscientists, biomedical engineers, surgeons, material scientists, data analysts, and rehabilitation specialists work side by side. Each discipline addresses a different failure mode, because when the human brain is involved, failure is not theoretical, it is biological. The process starts long before a human subject is involved. Neural interface development begins with simulation and animal models, where researchers test electrode designs, signal stability, and tissue response over time. Brain tissue is delicate. Even microscopic movement can trigger inflammation, scarring, or signal degradation. A successful implant must survive not just days or weeks, but years inside a living brain. This is why modern labs obsess over materials. Traditional rigid electrodes, while effective in short-term experiments, tend to damage surrounding neurons over time. New generations of implants use flexible polymers, ultra-thin conductive films, and biocompatible coatings designed to move with brain tissue rather than against it. Some electrodes are thinner than a human hair, engineered to minimize immune response while maintaining signal fidelity. Once hardware is validated, attention shifts to surgical precision. Implantation is not a generic procedure. Every brain is unique, folded differently, wired slightly differently. Preoperative imaging, high-resolution MRI, and CT scans are used to map individual anatomy down to millimeter accuracy. Surgeons plan trajectories that avoid blood vessels, minimize tissue disruption, and target specific neural populations. During implantation, the margin for error is measured in microns. Even slight deviations can compromise function or cause unintended effects. This is why many neural surgeries are performed with the patient awake. The brain itself does not feel pain, but real-time feedback from the patient allows surgeons to verify function during placement. Inside these operating rooms, cyborg technology stops being abstract. Electrodes are inserted, neural signals appear on monitors. Thought becomes data. After surgery, the lab becomes a training ground not for the machine, but for the human brain. Subjects do not immediately control devices with ease. Instead, They undergo weeks or months of calibration. They imagine movements, attempt tasks, receive feedback, and slowly learn how to shape their neural activity in ways the system can decode. This learning process reveals something unexpected. Control improves not because the brain produces better signals, but because it reorganizes itself. Functional imaging shows changes in cortical activity as the brain incorporates the machine into its sensoromotor loop. The boundary between biological limb and artificial device becomes neurologically blurred. These labs are also where the limits of augmentation become clear. Neural signals drift over time, electrodes degrade, algorithms overfit. Every success comes with constraints. Researchers track signal stability, electrode longevity, and performance decay with relentless scrutiny. A device that works for 6 months but fails after a year is not a breakthrough, it is a liability. Beyond motor control, labs explore cognitive and sensory integration. Memory prosthetics, for example, aim to restore hippocampal function by detecting neural encoding patterns and replaying them artificially. Early trials show promise, but also reveal the complexity of memory as a distributed, context-dependent process. Memory is not stored like data, it is reconstructed dynamically. Sensory labs focus on closing the feedback loop. A prosthetic limb without sensation is functional but alien. By routing sensor data back into the nervous system, researchers enable users to feel pressure, texture, and movement. This feedback dramatically improves control, embodiment, and emotional acceptance of the device. Crucially, many lab participants are not volunteers seeking enhancement. They are patients seeking restoration, people with paralysis, amputations, or neurological injury. Their goals are practical: independence, dignity, agency. This grounding keeps research focused and ethically constrained. Ethics boards oversee every stage. Questions of consent, long-term risk, data privacy, and reversibility are not optional discussions, they are prerequisites. Neural data is deeply personal. It reflects not just action, but intention, attention, and internal state. Labs treat this data with safeguards comparable to genetic information. The pace of progress may seem slow compared to consumer technology, but this is intentional. Unlike software, neural interfaces cannot be patched casually. Every change has biological consequences. And yet, progress is undeniable. Devices that once required room-sized equipment now fit inside the skull. Systems that once failed within hours now operate for years. Patients once locked inside their bodies now communicate, move, and interact through machines. Inside these labs, the cyborg is not a future concept. It is a present reality built carefully, tested relentlessly, and always constrained by the limits of the human nervous system. The question is no longer whether humans can integrate with machines. It is how far this integration can go before it changes what being human means. Section 4: From prosthetics to superlimbs, the evolution of advanced bionics. When replacement turns into enhancement. For most of medical history, prosthetics were defined by what they could not do. They were passive devices: hooks, wooden legs, rigid braces designed only to substitute for lost structure, not lost function. They restored balance, appearance, and limited utility, but they did not integrate with the nervous system. The brain treated them as external objects, not as parts of the self. That definition is now obsolete. Modern bionics represent a fundamental shift. Prosthetics are no longer replacements for missing limbs, they are interfaces between biology and engineering. This shift began not with motors or sensors, but with an understanding of how the brain controls movement in the first place. Human motion is not commanded muscle by muscle. It is orchestrated through hierarchical control systems involving the motor cortex, cerebellum, spinal circuits, and sensory feedback loops. Traditional prosthetics bypass this entire architecture. Advanced bionics attempt to reconnect it. The earliest breakthroughs came from myoelectric prosthetics, which detect electrical signals from residual muscles. These systems allowed amputees to control artificial hands by contracting specific muscles. While effective, they remained limited. Muscle signals are indirect proxies for intent, and they degrade with fatigue, injury, or long-term disuse. The transition to neural control changed everything. By tapping directly into peripheral nerves or cortical regions, advanced prosthetics now receive control signals closer to their source. This allows for finer movement, proportional force control, and simultaneous multi-joint coordination. Instead of selecting preset motions, users generate continuous, fluid movement. Equally important is feedback. Natural limbs operate through constant sensory input: pressure, stretch, temperature, vibration. Without feedback, even the most advanced prosthetic feels foreign. Modern bionic limbs incorporate force sensors, accelerometers, and tactile arrays that feed information back into the nervous system, either through peripheral nerve stimulation or cortical interfaces. This closes the loop. When the brain receives sensory confirmation of action, control becomes intuitive rather than deliberate. Users no longer think about operating a device, they simply act. As performance improved, an unexpected question emerged inside research labs. Should prosthetics be limited to human norms? Biological limbs are constrained by muscle fatigue, tendon elasticity, and injury risk. Machines are not. A motor does not tire. A carbon fiber structure does not fracture like bone. Once prosthetics reached parity with natural limbs, engineers began to explore whether they could exceed them. In controlled settings, the answer was yes. Advanced bionic arms can apply forces beyond typical human grip strength while maintaining precision. Robotic knees can optimize gait dynamically, reducing energy expenditure below that of biological walking. Exoskeletal components integrated with prosthetics can stabilize movement on uneven terrain, stairs, or inclines beyond normal human tolerance. These are not theoretical capabilities. They are measurable outcomes in clinical trials. This raises a critical distinction: restoration versus enhancement. Medical frameworks are built around restoring lost function, not surpassing it. Yet once enhancement becomes an emergent property of better design, the line becomes blurred. A prosthetic limb that automatically adjusts grip force to prevent slipping is already doing something the human hand cannot do reflexively. Researchers are careful here. Most labs deliberately cap performance to avoid ethical and regulatory complications. However, from a purely engineering perspective, there is no hard limit preventing superhuman capability. The real constraint is integration. A limb is only as effective as the brain's ability to control and interpret it. Excessive strength without sensory feedback leads to injury. Excessive speed without cognitive adaptation leads to error. Enhancement must occur in parallel with neural adaptation. This is why training protocols are as important as hardware. Users undergo neurorehabilitation programs that reshape motor maps and sensory expectations. Functional MRI studies show that as prosthetic performance improves, cortical representation expands. The brain allocates more resources to the artificial limb, treating it increasingly like a biological one. Some users experience what neuroscientists call embodiment, the subjective feeling that the prosthetic is part of their body. This is not psychological suggestion. It correlates with measurable changes in somatosensory cortex organization. At this stage, the prosthetic ceases to be a tool. It becomes a limb. Beyond limbs, bionic integration extends to spinal interfaces. In cases of paralysis, neural signals can bypass damaged spinal segments entirely. Brain signals trigger stimulation patterns below the injury site, reactivating dormant motor circuits. Patients regain voluntary movement not because the spine healed, but because the control pathway was rerouted. This reframes disability itself. Loss of function is no longer necessarily loss of capability. It may be loss of interface. As bionics advance, the human body becomes modular not in a mechanical sense, but in a functional one. Components can be replaced, augmented, or rerouted while maintaining continuity of identity and control. This is not science fiction. It is a consequence of understanding the nervous system as an information network rather than a purely biological structure. Yet with every gain in capability, complexity increases. Power management, long-term reliability, neural compatibility, and cybersecurity become central concerns. A limb that responds to neural commands is also, in principle, a system that can be disrupted, which leads to the next unavoidable question. If we can restore movement, sensation, and strength, can we also alter cognition itself? Section 5: Neural implants and memory. Hacking the brain. Can technology alter cognition without changing identity? Movement was the first frontier of human-machine integration, because it is visible, measurable, and externally verifiable. Memory and cognition are different. They're internal, subjective, and deeply tied to identity. To interfere with them is not merely to change function, but potentially to change the person. This is why neural implants that target memory and cognition represent the most sensitive and controversial phase of cyborg development. Memory is not stored in the brain like files in a computer. There is no single location where an experience resides. Instead, memories emerge from coordinated activity across multiple regions, particularly the hippocampus, entorhinal cortex, and distributed cortical networks. Encoding, consolidation, and retrieval are distinct processes, each involving different neural dynamics. This complexity makes memory both resilient and fragile. Early evidence that memory could be manipulated electrically came from epilepsy research. Neurosurgeons, mapping brain regions before surgery, discovered that stimulating certain areas could evoke vivid recollection sounds, images, emotional states. These were not hallucinations. They were internally generated reconstructions triggered by neural activation. The implication was profound. Memory could be accessed by direct intervention. The goal of modern neural memory implants is not to create memories, but to restore lost function. Patients with traumatic brain injury, stroke, or neurodegenerative disease often lose the ability to encode new memories even when old ones remain intact. This condition isolates individuals in a perpetual present, unable to form continuity. Researchers approached this problem by treating memory as a signal transformation process. In simplified terms, sensory input enters the hippocampus, is transformed into a neural code, and is then distributed to the cortex for long-term storage. If the transformation step fails, memory formation collapses. By recording neural activity patterns associated with successful encoding, scientists developed mathematical models of this transformation. These models could then be used to stimulate downstream regions when natural encoding failed. In early clinical trials, memory performance improved measurably when the implant was active. What makes this remarkable is not just the improvement, but the mechanism. The implant does not store memory. It modulates neural dynamics to guide the brain toward its own functional state. The brain still does the remembering. This distinction matters because it preserves agency. The technology does not overwrite cognition, it supports it. However, as capabilities expand, the line becomes thinner. Stimulation parameters affect not only memory strength, but emotional tone, salience, and association. Memory is inseparable from emotion. Alter one, and the other shifts. This introduces a fundamental constraint. Cognitive implants must be conservative by design. Excessive stimulation risks disrupting natural neural balance. Too little stimulation yields no benefit. Finding the correct operating window is one of the hardest problems in neuroengineering. Beyond memory, attention and learning have become targets of investigation. Disorders such as ADHD, depression, and obsessive-compulsive disorder involve dysregulation of cognitive control networks rather than structural damage. Deep brain stimulation in these cases does not restore lost tissue, it modulates network activity. Clinical results show that targeted stimulation can normalize pathological neural rhythms, improving focus, reducing intrusive thoughts, and restoring emotional regulation. These effects are reversible, adjustable, and, critically, individualized. The brain is not a generic system. Neural implants must be tuned to each person's unique circuitry. This personalization is both a strength and a limitation. It prevents mass deployment, but ensures safety. A key fear surrounding cognitive implants is loss of self. If memory and attention can be altered, what anchors identity? Neuroscience offers an unexpected reassurance. Identity is not localized. It emerges from continuity, not static content. Restoring function does not erase identity, it often restores it. Patients who regain memory or emotional regulation frequently report feeling more like themselves, not less. This suggests that dysfunction, not intervention, was the identity-altering force. Still, risks remain. Long-term stimulation effects are not fully understood. Neural plasticity means the brain adapts to intervention, sometimes in unpredictable ways. Ethical oversight remains strict, and enhancement applications beyond therapy are deliberately restricted. Unlike prosthetics, cognitive implants cannot be easily separated from the self. A limb can be removed. A memory-modulating device cannot be disengaged without consequence. This permanence elevates the stakes. Yet research continues because the need is real. Millions live with cognitive impairment that technology may alleviate for them. Neural implants are not about becoming cyborgs, they are about becoming functional. This section marks a shift in the documentary's arc. Human-machine integration is no longer about the body. It is about the mind, and once cognition is accessible, another question arises. If machines can influence memory and attention, can they also replace or augment the senses themselves? Section 6: Ethics and Risk. When humans become machines. Where scientific capability collides with moral limits, every transformative technology reaches a moment when the question is no longer can we, but should we. Neural implants and human-machine integration have reached that threshold. Unlike previous medical interventions, these technologies do not merely repair tissue or treat symptoms, they alter the interface between mind and world. This makes their ethical implications uniquely complex. At the core of the ethical debate lies a simple fact. The brain is not just another organ. It is the substrate of identity, agency, and consent. Any technology that interfaces directly with neural activity risks affecting autonomy in ways that are difficult to measure and even harder to reverse. Medical ethics traditionally rests on four principles: autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Neural augmentation strains all four simultaneously. Autonomy requires informed consent. But what does consent mean when the long-term cognitive and psychological effects of an implant are not fully known? Neural systems adapt over time. A device that appears safe and effective after 1 year may induce subtle changes after 10. No patient can consent to unknown futures, yet progress depends on long-term implantation. Beneficence demands that intervention provide clear benefit. In therapeutic contexts, paralysis, sensory loss, memory impairment, the standard is relatively clear, but as capabilities approach enhancement rather than restoration, benefit becomes subjective. Is increased reaction speed a medical benefit? Is enhanced memory? These questions expose the lack of a clear boundary between health and optimization. Non-maleficence, the mandate to do no harm, is particularly challenging in neural systems. Harm is not limited to physical injury. It includes unintended changes in mood, personality, impulse control, or perception. These effects may be subtle, cumulative, and difficult to attribute directly to the device. Justice concerns access and inequality. Neural augmentation technologies are expensive, complex, and resource-intensive. If they ever move beyond therapy, they risk creating biological stratification where cognitive or physical capability correlates with economic power. This possibility is not hypothetical. It is already discussed in regulatory planning documents. From a clinical perspective, risk management dominates every stage of neural implant development. The brain's immune response to foreign objects is one of the greatest obstacles. Even biocompatible materials can trigger inflammation, gliosis, and signal degradation. Over time, scar tissue can isolate electrodes, reducing effectiveness and increasing stimulation thresholds. There are also surgical risks: infection, hemorrhage, unintended neural damage. While these risks are statistically low in experienced centers, they are never zero. This makes elective implantation ethically fraught. Beyond biology, data ethics emerge as a new domain of concern. Neural implants generate data streams that reflect intention, attention, and internal state. This data is more intimate than genetic information. Who owns it? Who can access it? How is it protected? Most research protocols treat neural data as protected health information, subject to strict confidentiality. However, as systems become wireless and cloud integrated, the attack surface expands. Cybersecurity is no longer just about privacy, it becomes a matter of bodily safety. A compromised neural device is not a data breach, it is a direct interference with the human nervous system. This reality has prompted the emergence of neurosecurity as a research field. Encryption, authentication, and fail-safe shutdown mechanisms are being integrated into implant design. These measures are precautionary, but necessary. A system that can stimulate the brain must never be externally commandeered. Ethical oversight bodies recognize another unique challenge: reversibility. Many medical devices can be removed without lasting effect. Neural implants often cannot. Even after removal, neuroplasticity means the brain may not return to its prior state. Long-term stimulation reshapes neural circuits. This makes trial termination ethically complex. There is also the question of psychological integration. Some implant users report shifts in self-perception, not alienation, but recalibration. They must renegotiate the boundary between self and system. This process is not pathological, but it is profound. Ethics committees now routinely require psychological assessment and long-term follow-up. Public fear often focuses on loss of control, machines overriding human will. Scientifically, this fear is misplaced. Current implants do not generate intention. They respond to it. But the fear persists because control of the brain represents ultimate vulnerability. Even the perception of risk can undermine trust. For this reason, transparency is central to ethical progress. Researchers publish failures as well as successes. Regulatory agencies require staged trials, escalating only when safety is demonstrated. International standards bodies are developing frameworks specific to neural interfaces. Importantly, the scientific community itself has drawn clear red lines. Non-therapeutic cognitive enhancement via invasive implants is widely considered unethical at present. Military applications involving direct neural control are subject to intense scrutiny and restriction. The goal is not to stop progress, but to prevent misuse. This caution reflects an understanding earned through history. Technologies that alter human capability reshape society, not just individuals. neural implants will not be judged solely by their performance, but by their consequences. This section represents the moral center of the documentary. Human-machine integration is not merely a technical evolution, it is a test of collective responsibility. And yet, despite all constraints, research continues, because the benefits are real, because the suffering is real, and because understanding the brain inevitably leads to interaction with it. The next question is not about ethics or risk, it is about perception. If machines can restore movement, memory, and regulation, can they also change how humans see, hear, and feel the world itself? Section 7: The Science of Senses, Seeing, Feeling, and Hearing Through Machines. Restoring and enhancing human perception with neural interfaces. Movement and cognition demonstrate that the human nervous system can be interfaced with machines, but true integration extends far beyond motor control or memory. The senses vision, touch, hearing, and proprioception are the portals through which the brain experiences reality. They are also the systems most immediately transformed by neural augmentation. The earliest examples of sensory restoration are among the most clinically successful. Cochlear implants. For individuals with profound deafness, these devices bypass damaged hair cells in the inner ear to directly stimulate the auditory nerve. The brain interprets these electrical signals as sound. Modern implants offer multi-channel stimulation with fine temporal resolution, allowing users to detect pitch, tone, and even complex speech patterns. Cochlear implants reveal a principle central to all sensory neural interfaces. The brain does not require natural input to perceive naturally. It only requires input that conforms to the coding logic of the neural circuits. This principle underpins all subsequent attempts to restore, enhance, or augment perception. Vision presents a far greater challenge. Retinal prosthetics and cortical visual implants seek to replace lost photoreceptor function or stimulate the visual cortex directly. Unlike hearing, where the auditory nerve is a linear relay, vision is processed through millions of photoreceptors, complex retinal circuits, and multi-layered cortical areas. To approximate natural vision, a device must encode spatial, temporal, and intensity information with high fidelity. Current retinal implants use microelectrode arrays to stimulate surviving retinal neurons, producing localized perceptions called phosphene spots of light corresponding to electrode activation. By combining arrays and dynamic stimulation patterns, researchers can create rudimentary visual scenes. While resolution remains low compared to the biological retina, the brain integrates these signals remarkably well. Blind participants report the ability to perceive edges, movement, and spatial orientation, allowing navigation and object recognition. Direct cortical stimulation bypasses the retina entirely, targeting primary visual cortex neurons. Here, the challenge is even greater. Cortical maps are highly individualized, and the same stimulation can produce different percepts in different people. Researchers use iterative mapping and adaptive algorithms to calibrate stimuli. Over time, subjects can see shapes, movement, and spatial relationships, even if the visual experience is synthetic. Touch is the most complex of all senses to restore. The somatosensory system encodes pressure, vibration, texture, temperature, and proprioception across a highly distributed network. In prosthetic limbs, sensors embedded in fingertips, joints, and surfaces detect mechanical forces. These data are then converted into electrical stimulation patterns, delivered either to peripheral nerves or directly to somatosensory cortex neurons. Studies demonstrate that subjects receiving tactile feedback through implants can differentiate object stiffness, texture, and even subtle changes in force. Critically, this feedback is integrated into motor control. A prosthetic hand with sensation allows smoother, more precise grasping, reduces cognitive load, and generates a sense of ownership over the artificial limb. Beyond simple restoration, sensory implants open the door to augmented perception. Experiments in controlled labs have explored the addition of non-human senses. Devices can feed infrared, ultrasonic, or electromagnetic data into neural channels, allowing users to detect wavelengths or vibrations outside normal human capability. In all cases, the principle is the same. The brain is plastic, capable of incorporating entirely novel sensory input if delivered in a physiologically compatible format. This plasticity is central to success. Functional imaging shows that when new sensory channels are introduced, cortical areas expand or reassign themselves. Somatosensory and visual cortices can process signals from artificial inputs, and in some cases, subjects report the sensation as natural, even though it originates outside their body. Auditory augmentation follows a similar principle. Neural implants can enhance pitch discrimination, spatial localization, and frequency sensitivity. Experimental devices convert environmental data such as magnetic fields, air pressure changes, or sonar readings into auditory signals. Over time, users learn to interpret these signals intuitively, effectively extending their sensory bandwidth. Proprioception, the sense of body position and movement, is often overlooked, but critical for natural interaction with the world. Neural prosthetics and exoskeletal devices rely on proprioceptive feedback to coordinate motion accurately. Artificial sensors embedded in joints feed data to peripheral nerves, allowing the brain to perceive limb position, velocity, and load dynamically. This feedback loop is what makes advanced prosthetics feel like part of the body rather than an external tool. Sensory integration is also being applied to rehabilitation. Stroke survivors with impaired sensation can use neural interfaces to retrain neural circuits. By providing real-time tactile or visual feedback, therapists help the brain reorganize damaged networks, restoring function beyond what traditional therapy alone could achieve. Yet, despite these advances, challenges remain. Sensory signals are high-dimensional, temporally precise, and context-dependent. Encoding this information in a way the brain interprets accurately requires sophisticated modeling, real-time processing, and careful calibration. Any mismatch between input and expectation can cause disorientation, discomfort, or even maladaptive plasticity. This is where machine learning and adaptive control systems play a central role. Algorithms continuously adjust stimulation parameters based on neural responses, behavioral feedback, and performance metrics. The brain and machine co-adapt, optimizing perception in real time. From a documentary perspective, the key insight is clear. Sensory restoration and augmentation demonstrate that the brain is not a passive recipient, but an active interpreter. Whether restoring hearing, sight, touch, or proprioception, or extending perception into previously inaccessible modalities, the brain integrates, adapts, and ultimately redefines its own capabilities. By interfacing directly with the senses, machines become more than tools, they become extensions of experience. The line between natural perception and technologically mediated perception blurs. Users move, feel, and perceive through both biological and artificial channels simultaneously, creating a hybrid experience that is at once familiar and unprecedented. In this section, the science of senses illuminates both potential and caution. Sensory augmentation is no longer theoretical, it is a tangible, measurable reality. Yet it requires meticulous engineering, deep understanding of neural coding, and careful ethical oversight. The question that arises naturally from this section is profound. If machines can restore and extend the senses, can they also enable direct brain-to-brain communication, creating networks of shared experience? Section 8: Direct brain-to-brain communication and collective intelligence, the experimental frontier of shared neural experience. The previous sections explored how machines can restore and augment individual perception, movement, and cognition. Section 8 moves beyond the individual brain into the domain of interconnected minds. Direct brain-to-brain communication (B2B) represents one of the most radical frontiers in neuroscience, the possibility of transmitting thought, intention, and sensory experience directly from one human brain to another without conventional language or sensory mediation. The foundation of brain-to-brain interfaces rests on two critical capabilities: accurate neural decoding and precise neural encoding. The first, decoding, translates complex neuronal patterns representing intention, perception, or decision-making into a format readable by a machine. The second, encoding, converts those patterns into signals capable of activating neurons in another brain in a way that reproduces the intended perception or thought. Both tasks are extraordinarily challenging, because neural activity is massively parallel, time-sensitive, and highly individualized. Early demonstrations of B2B communication were rudimentary. In laboratory experiments, pairs of participants could share simple motor commands. Electroencephalography, EEG, was used to detect the intent to move a hand or finger in one person, which then triggered transcranial magnetic stimulation (TMS) in the second person's motor cortex, causing involuntary movement corresponding to the first individual's intention. This established a proof of principle. Neural information can, in fact, be transmitted between brains. These experiments have since become more sophisticated. In non-human primates, intercortical microelectrode arrays have enabled pairs of monkeys to control a shared cursor on a screen. Each individual's neural activity contributes to the movement, requiring real-time collaboration. Remarkably, The animals adapt to the combined control schema, effectively learning to co-manipulate an external object. Functional MRI and electrophysiology confirm that cortical plasticity underlies this adaptation. The brain reorganizes itself to accommodate shared neural inputs. Human studies have followed similar lines. Using non-invasive EEG and TMS, researchers have transmitted binary choices, simple visual patterns, or motor commands, while early implementations were limited to yes/no signals or left/right motor decisions. More complex paradigms are emerging. One study demonstrated the transmission of letters between brains, using an iterative encoding-decoding system, effectively allowing one participant to spell words directly into another's neural activity. While slow and constrained, this establishes the potential for symbolic thought transfer. Critical to all brain-to-brain systems is latency and synchronization. Neural signals are temporally precise. A motor command, sensory perception, or cognitive state occurs on the millisecond scale. Any delay in encoding, transmission, or decoding disrupts perception and function. Advanced B2B systems employ high-speed data acquisition, low-latency wireless transmission, and predictive algorithms to maintain temporal fidelity. The potential applications of B2B interfaces are profound. In medicine, individuals with severe motor impairments could leverage the neural activity of trained collaborators to perform actions beyond their own capabilities. In education, direct neural feedback could accelerate learning by providing real-time cognitive cues or sensory experiences. In research, collective neural networks allow scientists to observe distributed cognition in real time, opening new avenues for understanding consciousness, problem-solving, and social coordination. These possibilities are not purely theoretical. Experiments are underway that allow multi-person neural collaboration, forming primitive brain networks. In one paradigm, 3 participants collectively manipulate a robotic arm. Each brain contributes unique neural commands, and the system integrates these inputs to produce coordinated movement. Neural imaging reveals that participants' brains begin to synchronize at the level of cortical oscillations, a phenomenon termed interbrain coherence. This suggests that shared intentionality is not only computationally achievable but biologically facilitated. Ethical and safety concerns in B2B interfaces are magnified compared to single-person implants. Invasive systems, while offering higher fidelity, carry surgical risk. Non-invasive systems, while safer, suffer from signal limitations and require extensive training. There is also the potential for cognitive interference. If one brain's signals override or conflict with another's, unintended consequences could occur. Protocols emphasize reversibility, consent, and psychological monitoring. From a technical perspective, the field relies heavily on neural coding theory. Understanding how the brain represents specific perceptions, intentions, or decisions is essential for successful transmission. Machine learning algorithms, particularly deep neural networks, are employed to model individual neural architectures. These models predict how one brain's activity should be transformed to stimulate another's neurons in a meaningful way. Crucially, every individual's brain is unique, so B2B systems must be personalized and continuously adaptive. One of the most compelling insights from these experiments is that the brain is plastic enough to accept foreign signals as coherent information. Neural circuits can incorporate externally generated patterns as if they were internally produced, enabling learning, adaptation, and even intuitive control of shared resources. In essence, the brain does not rigidly reject outsider signals. It learns to interpret them, bridging biological individuality with collective computation. Beyond motor or cognitive collaboration, sensory B2B is emerging as a frontier. Experiments with visual and tactile feedback demonstrate that participants can experience simple perceptual inputs originating from another brain. These inputs are initially abstract and coarse, but with training, participants report a sense of external perception that is surprisingly coherent, as if seeing or feeling what another person does. This has profound implications for communication, empathy, and potentially remote collaboration. From a scientific perspective, B2B research challenges our understanding of individuality and consciousness. If neural patterns can be shared, combined, and synchronized across multiple brains, the line between self and collective begins to blur. Networks of brains interacting in real time may reveal principles of emergent cognition, distributed problem-solving, and collective intelligence that are impossible to study in isolation. Importantly, All current systems remain experimental. We are far from achieving direct, high-fidelity thought transfer in real time. Complex abstract ideas, nuanced emotion, and continuous sensory streams exceed current technological and biological capacity. However, incremental progress in decoding, encoding, and plasticity-guided adaptation demonstrates a clear trajectory toward more sophisticated collective neural interfaces. The implications extend beyond technology. If multiple humans can share neural states, society itself may evolve. Collaborative tasks could occur at cognitive speeds exceeding language or traditional communication. Education, healthcare, and remote work could be fundamentally transformed, but these advances must be approached with caution, guided by rigorous ethical oversight, legal frameworks, and comprehensive psychological assessment. This section represents a bridge between individual augmentation and collective human capability. Machines have enabled one brain to interface with another. The next frontier is the interface between the augmented mind and artificial intelligence itself. Section 9: Human-AI Hybrid Minds. The next frontier of cognition. How artificial intelligence is amplifying human thought. By now, the documentary has traced a path from neural prosthetics to direct brain-to-brain communication. Section 9 explores the convergence of neural interfaces with artificial intelligence, a development that promises to amplify human cognition in ways that were once purely theoretical. This integration is not about replacing the human brain, it is about creating a hybrid system in which AI interprets, predicts, and enhances human thought in real time. The foundation of this technology lies in neural decoding. Modern neural interfaces capture electrical activity from the cortex, peripheral nerves, or subcortical structures. These signals are incredibly high-dimensional, millions of neurons firing asynchronously, with patterns reflecting both immediate intention and complex, context-dependent computation. Human cognition is dynamic, probabilistic, and noisy. AI excels precisely in these domains, as it can process large, multidimensional datasets, identify patterns, and make predictions faster than any biological network alone. In practice, AI serves multiple functions within neural augmentation systems. One function is signal enhancement and filtering. Neural signals are inherently noisy. Electrodes detect spurious spikes, crosstalk, and interference from surrounding tissue. Deep learning algorithms, convolutional neural networks, and recurrent neural networks analyze these signals in real time, extracting meaningful patterns and discarding irrelevant activity. This allows prosthetic limbs, exoskeletons, or sensory implants to respond more accurately to the user's intent. Another function is predictive control. Consider a robotic arm controlled by the motor cortex. Even with direct neural input, there is a lag between thought and execution due to signal transmission, processing, and mechanical response. AI algorithms predict intended movement trajectories milliseconds in advance, effectively anticipating user commands and improving fluidity, speed, and precision. The result is motion that feels natural and immediate, despite the complexity of the machine-human interface. Beyond motor augmentation, AI is now integrated into cognitive prosthetics. Neural implants designed to enhance memory or attention can feed their data streams into AI models trained on individual neural dynamics. These models identify moments of lapses, suggest corrective stimulation, and optimize learning in real time. Early trials have shown measurable improvements in working memory, decision-making, and cognitive focus for patients with impaired function. Importantly, the AI adapts continuously, recalibrating as neural patterns evolve. Perhaps the most transformative application is co-adaptive intelligence. In hybrid systems, AI does not merely react, it collaborates. By continuously modeling the user's cognitive state, the AI anticipates needs, suggests actions, and even generates novel solutions in real time. For example, in high-stakes environments such as surgery or piloting, AI-enhanced neural systems can monitor intention, predict errors, and assist in real-time task execution. The human operator remains in control, but cognitive bandwidth is significantly expanded. Sensory augmentation also benefits from AI integration. Visual, auditory, and tactile prosthetics produce vast amounts of data. Raw sensory input often exceeds the brain's capacity for interpretation, particularly when artificial modalities are introduced. AI processes, compresses, and encodes this data into a form that the brain can interpret efficiently. For example, a retinal implant may detect hundreds of thousands of pixels of light, but the AI converts this into simplified spatial patterns that the visual cortex can understand. This transformation maximizes perceptual clarity while minimizing cognitive overload. Brain-to-brain networks, discussed in Section 8, are also enhanced by AI. Multi-brain systems produce combinatorial neural complexity that exceeds human interpretative capacity. AI can act as a mediator, integrating signals from multiple participants, resolving conflicts, and optimizing output. In this context, AI becomes a neural translator, enabling distributed cognition that would otherwise be impossible. Crucially, all hybrid systems rely on continuous feedback and co-adaptation. The human brain and AI are in a closed-loop interaction. Each adapts to the other. Neuroplasticity allows the brain to incorporate AI-generated input as part of its operational repertoire. Simultaneously, machine learning algorithms adjust to individual neural idiosyncrasies. This mutual adaptation is what distinguishes true hybrid intelligence from simple assistive technology. Ethical and practical considerations are paramount. AI-mediated cognition raises questions of privacy, autonomy, and dependence. If AI predicts and influences thought, where does human agency end? Current research protocols ensure that AI acts only as an enhancement or restoration tool, never as a controller. Neural data is encrypted, models operate locally whenever possible, and interventions are reversible. Long-term studies monitor for unintended psychological or cognitive effects. Despite these challenges, early results are promising. Pilot studies indicate that AI-enhanced neural interfaces can reduce cognitive fatigue, increase learning efficiency, and extend memory retention. In motor applications, users perform complex tasks with precision exceeding natural human limits. Hybrid cognition systems are demonstrating, for the first time, the ability to augment not just action or perception, but thought itself. This section illustrates a profound truth. The combination of neural interfaces and AI does not merely restore lost function, it creates new capabilities. Humans remain the originators of intention and decision-making, but machines amplify, refine, and extend these processes. The line between biological cognition and technological augmentation is no longer distinct. It is a continuum. From a societal perspective, the implications are enormous. Education, healthcare, defense, scientific research, and industrial applications could all benefit from hybrid cognitive systems. Individuals with neural impairments may regain independence at unprecedented levels. Healthy individuals may acquire enhanced perceptual and cognitive capabilities. The integration of AI with the human nervous system promises a new era of intelligence that is distributed, adaptive, and scalable. Yet, this frontier is still in its infancy. Current systems are laboratory-bound, requiring extensive calibration, specialized equipment, and clinical oversight. The transition from controlled environments to widespread application involves solving challenges in miniaturization, energy efficiency, signal fidelity, cybersecurity, and regulatory compliance. Every neural interface must respect the fragility of human physiology and the sanctity of individual identity. The trajectory is clear. As AI continues to evolve, and as neural interfaces become more sophisticated, humans will increasingly operate as hybrid cognitive systems. Thought, memory, perception, and action will all be enhanced, mediated, and amplified through adaptive, intelligent machines. By merging the organic with the computational, we are entering an era in which human intelligence is no longer confined to biology alone. The next and final section will conclude the documentary. Section 10 will reflect on the philosophical, societal, and scientific ramifications of fully integrated human-machine systems, exploring the ultimate implications for identity, society, and the future of what it means to be human. Section 10: The future of the human-machine symbiosis. What it means to be human in the age of neural augmentation. The journey of the documentary reaches its culmination. From prosthetic limbs to direct brain-to-brain interfaces, from sensory restoration to AI-augmented cognition, we arrive at a point where science challenges the very definition of humanity. Section 10 examines the long-term implications, the philosophical questions, and the societal transformations that accompany fully integrated human-machine systems. Neural augmentation has evolved from concept to laboratory reality. Prosthetic limbs now replicate natural movement with remarkable fidelity, even surpassing biological limits in strength, precision, and endurance. Cognitive implants restore memory, attention, and executive function, enabling individuals with neurological impairments to reclaim autonomy. Sensory interfaces not only restore lost input, but can introduce entirely novel modalities, allowing humans to perceive previously inaccessible aspects of the world. Brain-to-brain networks and AI integration are beginning to create collective intelligence and hybrid cognition, challenging traditional notions of individuality. This technological trajectory raises a profound question. At what point does enhancement become transformation? Biological systems are inherently adaptive, but neural interfaces accelerate adaptation to unprecedented speeds. The human brain, shaped over millions of years to operate within biological constraints, is now capable of integrating artificial channels of information and control. As these channels become more sophisticated, the distinction between natural and synthetic cognition blurs. One can anticipate a future where thoughts, decisions, and perceptions are co-mediated by biology and technology. From a physiological standpoint, the human body is becoming a modular system. Limbs, sensory apparatus, and even cortical circuits are no longer fixed but can be repaired, augmented, or replaced. This modularity introduces resilience. Injuries, degeneration, or congenital deficits can be mitigated or eliminated. It also introduces potential for enhancement. Strength, endurance, sensory acuity, and cognitive processing may exceed the historical human baseline. Importantly, these augmentations are not science fiction. They are extensions of validated neuroengineering principles, prosthetic design, and AI integration. Yet with capability comes responsibility. The ethical framework surrounding human-machine integration must evolve in parallel with technological advances. Autonomy, privacy, identity, and equity are no longer abstract principles. They are active constraints that shape system design, deployment, and regulation. Neural interfaces that modulate cognition or perception are inherently irreversible in their effect on neural plasticity, even if the devices themselves are removable. This demands rigorous oversight, continuous monitoring, and societal dialogue about acceptable risk, informed consent, and equitable access. Society itself is poised to change. Collective cognition enabled by brain-to-brain networks and AI integration could transform collaboration, education, and decision-making. Complex tasks that previously required hierarchical teams may be executed through distributed, real-time cognitive networks. Learning could become experiential rather than linguistic. Knowledge could be transmitted as neural patterns, and collective problem-solving could operate on temporal scales far beyond conventional human capacity. These shifts have implications for governance, economics, and interpersonal relationships, as traditional hierarchies based on information access or processing speed may no longer apply. On an individual level, identity is undergoing redefinition. Humans have always understood themselves as embodied, limited beings. Neural augmentation challenges this conception. Prosthetics, implants, and AI interfaces extend the mind into artificial substrates. Sensory inputs may originate from machines. Decisions may be assisted, enhanced, or refined by computational partners. Yet early clinical observations suggest that rather than diminishing selfhood, these interventions often restore continuity of identity for those impaired by injury or disease. They reinforce agency when function would otherwise be lost, and expand capability when enhancement is applied judiciously. The integration of AI raises additional philosophical questions. Cognitive augmentation does not merely extend memory or attention, it introduces a co-actor in the human mind. The AI interprets, predicts, and adapts alongside the user. This collaboration transforms the individual into a hybrid system, blending biological intention with algorithmic augmentation. From a practical standpoint, this enables unprecedented problem-solving, creativity, and decision-making speed. From a philosophical standpoint, it challenges the concept of self-contained agency. To what extent is thought purely human when it is mediated by an intelligent machine? Risk management remains paramount. Cybersecurity, signal integrity, neural plasticity, and unintended cognitive or psychological effects are active areas of research. As augmentation expands beyond therapy into enhancement, society must grapple with inequality. Access to neural augmentation may confer not just functional restoration, but competitive advantage. Regulatory frameworks will need to balance innovation with fairness, ensuring that human-machine integration benefits society broadly rather than concentrating capability in privileged subsets. Despite these challenges, the trajectory is clear. Neural interfaces, prosthetics, sensory augmentation, brain-to-brain networks, and AI co-integration collectively point toward a new paradigm of human capability. The human nervous system is no longer a closed system, it is an adaptive, modular, and extensible network capable of incorporating machines, algorithms, and new sensory channels. The next decades will determine not only the technical capabilities of these systems, but the societal structures and ethical frameworks that govern them. From a scientific perspective, this is a singular moment in evolution. For the first time, intelligence is no longer purely biological, sensory experience is no longer purely natural, and the boundaries of the body and mind are no longer fixed. Humans are entering an era of conscious symbiosis with machines, where thought, perception, and action are co-mediated, amplified, and extended. This symbiosis offers restoration, enhancement, and the potential for collective cognition that transcends individual limits. The final insight is profound yet simple. Technology does not merely supplement humanity, it transforms the human condition. The mind is no longer confined to neurons, the body no longer constrained by biology, and perception no longer limited to natural senses. Through neural interfaces, prosthetics, sensory augmentation, brain-to-brain communication, and AI integration, humans are becoming truly hybrid beings capable of thought, perception, and action that were once impossible. In conclusion, the future of the human-machine symbiosis is not a distant speculation. It is a tangible scientific frontier, unfolding today in research labs, clinics, and experimental environments. It challenges our notions of identity, ethics, and capability while offering unprecedented opportunities for restoration, enhancement, and exploration. Humanity is poised to enter a new evolutionary epoch, one in which biology, technology, and intelligence converge to redefine what it means to be human.